Um, so I'm Ali. I am a digital evangelist, which sounds very, very exciting. I work part for the connectional team in the evangelism growth team. I also I'm part time at Cliff College, which is where I work out of. So I oversee all their digital output, which is great. And my role consists of really like a lot of training, what we're doing today, thinking about digital kind of things, as well as running projects and doing that kind of thing. My background, just to tell you and make us all on an even playing field, I got into digital completely by accident. I never really intended to do that, but sort of that's how most people get into ministry, isn't it? I was a student at Cliff beforehand, and at the end of my time at Cliff, they asked me to do a piece of creative mission, which was great. And the creative mission we chose to do was basically, I didn't do anything for September. I started in August, did nothing in September, and not much in October, and it came to nearly Christmas. I was like, right, I need to be doing something because they're going to ask me about it soon. So I started writing, along with another friend, we started writing a Christmas story out on Twitter, because Twitter was relatively new at this point, called The Nativity, which is very clever. And we just literally started writing out. We just saw loads of people engage with the Christmas story in a new way, both Christians, but also a substantial amount of people who had no faith at all. And we found it a real interesting experience, translating the Christmas story into a way that people could approach the story in a new way. And so we just saw this huge opportunity in digital. So we decided to do the same with the Easter story, which was really interesting. The second year around, so the first year, it wasn't very big, about 400 people sort of by the end of the first year. And then in the second year, we connected with a few like organisations who partnered with us on it. And we got Paul Carenza, who some of you all know, the comedian who wrote for Miranda Hart, to make the script that I'd written funny, and add some like proper funny humour into it, which people really connected with, particularly the Christmas story. I mean, it's less appropriate with the Easter story, but the Christmas story very much so. And he, I mean, it's not a lot of fun you can have about people dying on crosses. There's not much humour to get there, unless you want to get dark, and that's a bit weird. So we did just had this beautiful kind of thing that happened. So halfway through, we're into sort of middle of December, and my mum calls me, and she says, "You're in the Daily Telegraph." Well, like no kind of no understanding of why we're in a Daily Telegraph. Yeah, there you go. I like that, Jen. So I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done wrong? I'm in a Daily Telegraph. What the heck could it be? But it turns out we wrote a press release and they picked up on it. We just it sort of went huge. So by the end of it, we had 10,000 on Facebook and sort of like multiple thousands on Twitter, and we just really saw this beautiful engagement with the Christmas story, and so that kind of led us. We won a number of awards for it and those kind of things, and got in touch with a number of really creative digital people. And so I say that not because I'm an expert, because I am by no means an expert, more than we're all stumbling through this journey of digital and we're finding out where we're at as we go. So don't feel like I've got a degree. I've worked for Google, know everyone at Apple. That's not at all where I come from. I come from a background, and after leaving Cliff, I went to work for a church. Shout out Jen. I went to work for a church at Swanbank, and I was just a church communicator there. I literally did pastoring stuff with the young people, but I also did digital stuff on the side. So I get the problems you're all having. I completely understand them. I've been there, and I still am deeply involved and deeply committed to the church. So do not worry that I am super technical. I'm a little bit technical, but I'm also very friendly. That being, so I'm going to rattle through a number of bits of content. Okay, you'll hopefully have picked up now. I'm very, very friendly. So if you want to stop me, please don't feel like you're stopping me mid-flow. I want to give you, in the next sort of 50 minutes, as much information as I can. Okay, that's my aim. So I will leave points for you to ask questions, but also if you want to put them in the chat, that's fine. Do that. But also if you want to pop my microphone over and just ask me to clarify stuff, that's absolutely fine. I'm not going to tell you off. okay? Absolutely fine. And I'm going to leave a really good, I am not going to cover any deeply technical stuff until the end, okay? As in, I'm not going to cover what cameras you want to buy or that kind of thing until the end. I'm going to leave you to ask me those questions because I could spend all my time talking about stuff. So I'll leave a good chunk of time at the end. So if you've got really specific questions, hold them about bits of kit, please feel free to ask me them, hold them until the end and I'll do that. Is that okay? Thumbs up, great. So we're going to do a little bit of a little bit of communication theory stuff at the beginning. I do it everywhere I go, so if you've heard it before, I apologise. Just like building the foundations out. Then I'm going to talk to you a little about the Bible because I believe in Jesus and I think the Bible's important. And then I'm going to thank you, Jen. And then I'm going to talk about hybrid for a good portion of that. Okay. And just we'll see my keynote. Any questions or you want some specific support, please feel free to jot that down. I spend my life, I have a privilege of spending most of my kind of working life meeting with people just the same as you, trying to help you out. So please feel free to email me and I'll offer you whatever support I can. I'll point you in the right direction. I'm going to talk about 4 M's. I need to just be really honest. The one thing that I would recommend above everything else, he's actually become a friend of mine, and he wasn't a friend before I started recommending his book to everyone. And then I started selling copies of his book for him, and now we've become friends. So you could say that he's got an agenda, but he's actually a really nice guy. And the guy is called Mark Crosby, okay? And he's wrote a book called So Everyone Can Hear. It's available on all like bad and good platforms, depending on your opinion of Amazon. It's available everywhere in all good bookshops. It's called So Everyone Can Hear. It's a really amazing one-stop shop for church communications, okay? So it does all the basic stuff, but it's also got tons of diagrams and stuff that you can utilize. And a lot of the stuff I'm going to take in the first section is taken from that book. So I've seen individual church leaders take it on. I've seen church leaders buy it for their whole kind of leadership team and read it together. It works on all those different kind of levels, okay? So please feel free to use that. And then you'll realize that what I'm talking about now is completely stolen from there. Okay, so that's what, just want to be honest that I haven't written this myself. So we're going to talk quickly through 4 M's. Okay, the 4 M's of church communication, or just any communication really, from preaching right through to doing a flyer or a notice board or doing a church service, and any of these, or doing a poster, okay? The first one is message. So what is it you want to say? If you had to like sum up your message in one line, what is it exactly you're trying to communicate to the person? The second is market. So who are you trying to reach? I'll go back over these in a bit more depth in a second. The 4 is media. So where can you find them? What media is the right kind of media to reach those people on? And the 4th is moment. So when is it best to reach them? How far in advance? What time of day? Message. So we obviously all start when we want to communicate from a place of passing a message on from A to B, don't we? We're communicating something from A to B. That can be your church service, that could be a poster, that could be anything you want to communicate from A to B, but you've all got a message you want to communicate. The second thing is, what is the market? So the really interesting thing about hybrid that we're going to talk about later on, which is where this works really well, is it's really good to ask yourself, who are the people you're aiming this at? Okay, so who are you aiming at? Are you aiming at people that you might want to come to church? Are you aiming at people who can't get to church? Are you aiming at people who don't yet go to church? What kind of hybrid action are you aiming at? Because we're to kind of clarify that structure, because that will help you decide exactly how you move forward from there. Okay, it'll then help you ask questions like, what is important to those people? Okay, so if they're like pre-church or unaffiliated people, as we call them in the evangelism growth team, okay, people who aren't connected to the church, then the way you present your worship will be really important. Explanation will be really important, okay? Explaining what you're doing, not jumping from one thing to another, when actually it's going to become really important. Okay, but you need to kind of understand who is it you're aiming for. And then the next thing is, what do you know about them? Okay, what do you know about the concerns they have in life? What do you know about the worries? What are the things they're excited about? What issues are they facing? You want to try and build up this thing, like this understanding of who these things are aimed at. The way we do that is, I do that personally, is I really believe in what I call personaing. Okay, you'll have heard that before. Writing personas about people, and I'm a really imaginative character. So the way I do that is I literally draw the person out. Okay, so I get a piece of paper. I don't physically draw the hair colour. That ain't really important to me. What I do is I draw everything about that person. I give them a name. Okay, so when I talk about them in meetings, people will know I'm referring to. I'm just going to use a name because she comes up. I'm referring to Jen. Okay, I'm communicating directly with Jen. What do I know about her? Well, I know she's a church leader. Okay, I know these are some of the concerns you have. I can sort of predict that. I know this is where she lives, and so these are some of maybe the issues she's facing. I know. So you then start to build out. One of the best ways to do that is to ask people who are in the category that you're building. Okay, I know that's really scary, okay, and really hard to do, but taking them out for a coffee or giving them something in lieu of the fact you're doing that is really, really good way to do that. Okay, it's actually a great form of evangelism. Okay, but it's also a really good trick to get people engaged. Okay, and then you can go back to your leadership team and say, this is who we're aiming at. I know this about them because I've done research. Okay, and another good way to that is to get people you're connecting with to talk to their family who don't go to church. Okay, ask. What's amazing about that is you're actually giving permission to people to involve themselves in the life of your church or your post or your event, whatever it is. Okay, the next thing is media. Once you know who you're going to reach, the media is then a really easy question to answer. Okay, so for example, if you're hybrid, it's for some people who can't come to church. Okay, for instance, and maybe they can't come to church because they're housebound. Okay, maybe they can't come to church because they've got physical disability, or maybe they can't come to church for a number of different reasons. Then the media is going to become really important. Yeah, that makes sense. So if they're of an older age bracket, then possibly asking them to go onto like Facebook or YouTube might not work. Okay, they've been on Zoom, so maybe you now need to think about what's the next stage you can invite them to. Maybe it's that they need to go onto your website, which is actually really easy for them to find. Okay, it's basically like going on Zoom and they can access your website that way. Maybe there's another step that you need to do in the process to make that for them. If you're wanting to engage with young people, then Facebook is definitely not the right place for you. Okay, it is not the right place for you. They have gone, they have left because those old folks have taken it over. Okay, they're on Instagram, they're on TikTok, they're all over the place, but they are not, okay, on Facebook. And so then you start to build up a picture of the media. And then the next thing, which I love, is moment. Okay, if you've now got people engaged, okay, this is not a criticism of anyone, not a criticism of my church, well it is, but so I can criticize my church because I've worked there, but when we get people engaged, which we have, okay, what is the next thing we're inviting them to? Okay, what is the moment that we're inviting them to? Because we can't just expect people to find their way into our communities. We need to extend the moment out to them. Does that make sense? We really need to think about these moments, okay? And then also, we need to think about that person from what is the right time of day to reach them? Okay, so for instance, let's talk about hybrid church, okay? So we're doing most of our church services will be on a Sunday morning or a Sunday evening, okay? If we're expecting people to find our way to that and we don't give them any notice during the week, okay, we just expect them to turn up on a Sunday, that's going to fail pretty quickly, okay? We need to give them good notice and then we need a reminder on the morning of. Here's how you'll find your way to our church service. Okay, here's how you access our service. It will be live in, 15 minutes. It'll be live in half an hour. Stay here, you're in the right place, it is coming. Okay, they're the type of things where we need to think through what is the moment, okay? And then what I just alluded to is, then we need to think through what is the moment after the moment. Okay, you've now got somebody engaged. Okay, so Jen's got people coming to her church service who she has not connected with before. They listen to her preach. What are the next point they're going to access? Are you inviting them to the next Sunday? Is there something they can connect with in the week? what is the next connection point for that person? We can't just end the service, do the grace or a blessing, okay, and then have no way for them to find any other access into the service, okay? I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. I'm going to skip this slide because I talk for too long, so give me a second to jump on. I'm just going to, and the reason I think is this, okay? This verse is really important to me. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Okay, I recognize you're all super busy people, okay? No one I work with has loads of free time, okay? I just don't work with those kind of people, okay? I work with people who are topped up to the max and have very little time. So what I want to say to you is, whatever we're going to talk about in the next half an hour about hybrid church, just choose a little bit and do it really well, okay? Don't go for the sporadic trying everything approach, okay? Just do a little bit and do it really well, because that's exactly what the gospel is about. The gospel is about doing a little bit, okay, doing it really well. And this psalm literally says to me, don't, like, if the Lord's building it, so we're starting to see fruit and success from it, and prayer, and we're doing all the good stuff that goes with it, we're not laboring in vain, okay? This is how you change church culture as far as like communication is concerned. These are all in Mark's book. I find these really helpful when it comes to like church communication, okay? So firstly, you need to have a real understanding of what the values of your church are, okay? By values, the easiest way, the best way I've heard it described is values are the foundation of your like church, okay? They're literally, they very rarely change, okay? I don't know if you've ever had to change the foundation of your house. I never have, and I hope I never have to, because I imagine it's expensive. Okay, so they're the foundation. Then you've got your vision, and your vision is a picture of a preferred future. Okay, it's where you're going. And that is like the outside of your house, okay? That's like the rooms and the framework. And actually, you can add like an extension on, provided you get planning permission whenever you want. Okay, so provided you get buy-in from your leadership team, Jen could say about her church, she wants to pivot this way for 6 months. She has a little extension onto her church. It lasts 6 months, okay? That's okay. Okay, and then you have to work out how to communicate that. So what are the objectives and how are you going to make that vision a reality? Then what's the strategy? And this is what we're going to talk about today. What is the strategy? And then, this is why I love this diagram, and then do the policy. Okay, always do your digital social media policy last. Here's why. Okay, because I spend a lot of my time listening to church leaders and say, well, I can't do that because our policy says this. Actually, my understanding of a policy is it allows you to do your vision safely. Okay, so it's all about thinking about ways to make these things safe, okay? To make a digital platform safe, to make a thing safe. And so I always suggest do your policy last and keep revisiting it, okay? I'm going to skip the first breakout room if that's okay, Brian, because I'm definitely going to run out of time if I do that. So, we talked a little bit about church communication. I want to spend the last sort of 27 minutes talking about hybrid, because that's why you all came. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of like background work, and then I'll offer you a few tips, talk about a few issues, and then I'm going to give you time to ask me loads of questions. So here's how church was pre-COVID. Okay, this is the best description I've heard of it. Okay, 2 things. Okay, pre-COVID, the best description of church I've heard is that the church was a translator. Okay, the churches were translators of the gospel. Our job as people who led churches or did worship was to translate a message to the people. Okay, so we would literally, we'd either look at the lectionary or do the sermon series, whatever, or do whatever we wanted, whatever type of church are in those 3 categories. And then we translate a message, okay, we as preachers, as worship leaders, would translate the message into people. And then what happened during COVID is we became curators rather than translators. Okay, so we were pulling together worship rather than translating a message. Okay, so we were creating testimony, we were pulling together videos, we were pulling together stuff that happened on the web, we were finding resources, and we were creating acts of worship. Okay, similar to how an art gallery has a creator that pulls together loads of different bits, we were doing that. We were thinking about what is it like to watch it in person, and what is it like to watch it after the fact? How are we going to allow people who are feeling disgruntled with life itself to access worship? We were starting to create not only our worship, but also people's experience within our worship. And then we began to think, right, well, people are being really passive. So now we're going to have to try and activate them. And we began to think about that. And so rather than translating worship, we were creating worship or curating worship. Okay, and that's how we went. And the reason for that is, I'm just going to dig into that a little bit more, okay, about what the difference between those two things are. Okay, so a translator is someone who's called to study theology, sociology, philosophy, and bring insights. Okay, that's what the job of a preacher was pre-COVID. And then we did that by connecting insight to culture. So we'd literally be connecting the Bible, okay, to the culture, and we'd be doing that. Okay, and then we do the last bit. Okay, we'd apply it to people's lives. That's what we did pre-COVID, and some did it better than others, but our kind of preachers held that job, or at least that's what I was taught about preaching in local preachers. Whether or not it's the right thing, you can tell me. And kind of we were taught to be educators, teachers, and wisdom spreaders. That was our job as people who led worship, who preached. Okay, we were taught to do that in all sorts of different ways, and we were told to offer wisdom and guidance. And then COVID hit. Okay, then suddenly we were curating worship rather than translating worship, and we started to have to think that when people are sat home on their own, okay, or with families or in couples, suddenly they had all the access they needed on their phones. Okay, so rather than me translating the gospel, actually they can access all this stuff throughout the week. Okay, and we're actually asking a question: how do we help people to understand who they are in this context? Okay, in the context of COVID, in the context of their home, how do we help people understand who they are? Okay, and then we also began to understand, it was beautiful, and I have watched loads of Gen services, so I could talk about it. It was beautiful to see, no, you did great. It was beautiful to see how we shifted worship from, rather than being passive, was being active, but our action had to change. Okay, so we began to realize that an action wasn't do this, but an action was continue to do this in your homes. Like continue to respond to what God is doing throughout the week. Okay, we were much more interested in bringing people together, building a community, okay, and evening people out. And actually, one of the things that happened during COVID is people stepped out of their echo chambers. Okay, so what curator asked people to do is, the danger of the internet is that people live in echo chambers. Okay, and Black Lives Matter, okay, has started to ask questions of, and all the Brexit stuff that happened before that have helped to start to ask questions of, how do we encourage people to test what they're reading online? Okay, the danger of curated worship, and I'm going to talk about the dangers in a second, are, I go online, okay, I Google, I might be preaching on the woman at the well, okay, and this is what loads of preachers now do, okay, the woman on the well sermon, and I start to read other people's sermons, okay, and I don't read who it was by, okay, I just read the context of it, and I don't know anything about who they are or what the lens that they're looking through the gospel are, okay, and so our job as people who are leading worship or leading churches, particularly in a hybrid sense, is we have to be super wise. Okay, if we're going to create worship and pull things from all over the place, it's our job to think carefully through how we do that well. Okay, how we pull on all the different bits of worship and pull them together to create something that's really safe. And I use safe in the most beautiful way, not as in stopping people doing things, but as a, we know what's going on. And also our job is to connect people's lives with the work of God. Okay, so we and this is not positive, and I say this gently because I'm involved in leading worship and will be again, but God wasn't locked in the building because people weren't. And so people were accessing God in their homes, okay, with other people listening in, and we all knew that. Okay, so husbands who didn't go to church were listening. Sons and daughters who'd lost connection with church were listening in. And actually, it was our job to begin to ask the question, how do we help connect into people's lives. Some people who may have a really good faith and some people may have none but are listening. Okay, and so that happened. One of the things that was beautiful during COVID was we just unlocked testimony. We just recognized that testimony was such an easy thing to do. We just started getting people to share their stories, either on Zoom, okay, and didn't we all do this? We've got people to tell their stories on Zoom. We got people to open up on Zoom. We went into coffee after our services, and we got people connected, or we put them in front of a camera and realized that testimony was cool. And I think it was really exciting to see that. And that was our first steps into hybrid, okay? That was the first unlocking of hybrid. And I'm going to just give you a free quote. It's beautiful. And then I'm just going to tell you what hybrid is, okay? I haven't done that intentionally because I just wanted to do that piece of work first. Okay, I've gone backwards, which is neither helpful for anyone, because you don't need to see all of that again. This is by Casey Newhoff, who's a phenomenal blogger, okay? Absolutely amazing blogger. And he says, the future belongs to worship leaders and preachers who exegete the culture and the audience as well as they exegete the text. Okay, the future belongs to worship leaders and preachers who exegete the culture and the audience as well as they exegete the text. Okay, and I just want to tell you why I think that quote's so good. Okay, I think that we're being challenged as communicators of the gospel, all of us, people who lead churches, to offer an act of worship that connects God with culture. Okay, and by God, and I experience God through the Bible, okay, through the word, we're being told that we need to think about the audience and think about the culture and bring the text into that. It's actually what the Bible did in its origin, but we've moved preaching and worship in a very different direction, and COVID just asked us to go back to where it came from. Okay, that was what Wesley did, in my experience, and there's people in this call who are much more knowledgeable than I am, but that is exactly what Wesley did. Okay, he exegeted the audience that was in front of him and what was going on in the world. Okay, and he said, this is what God says about that. Okay, and that's what hybrid did for us. Okay, that's what COVID has done for us. And so I'm going to pause for a second and stop sharing so you can see my beautiful face. So I'm going to rob a definition of hybrid from a wonderful friend of mine. She's a friend of Jen's as well, Joe Cox-Darling, okay, who is somebody who's much more knowledgeable about hybrid than I am. And in the early days when hybrid became a thing, we started talking together about what hybrid alongside a number of other people. Here's the best description of hybrid that I've heard. Hybrid, okay, is about doing what we do online, offline, okay, and doing what we do offline, online. Okay, I'll say it one more time. Hybrid is about doing what we do online, offline, and what we do offline, online. Okay, so if we're pulling together an act of worship, the hybrid, we need to think about how we do that part of the service well online, okay, as well as we do offline. So we need to think about, we're trying to make one of equal importance to the other. Okay, so we're not trying to make the people online feel more important than people offline. We're not trying to make the people offline feel more important than people online. We're trying to bring them together into one place. Okay, that's what we're hopefully all here to try and learn how to do, to try and do those things. And I think that's really helpful, okay? Because my experience of like planning worship has been in a like offline sense for most of my life. And so I immediately fall back into that default, okay? We're all sort of starting to go back into church or thinking about it. We started planning worship and we'll immediately plan it the way we did before because that's what we've been taught, right? And there's nothing wrong about that. We just now need to, when we plan an act of worship, okay, we just need to go back through it and think, if I'm going to do that, okay, if I'm going to do that example, for instance, or that activity, then I think, what would it look like doing that online? Okay, so here's a good example. So at the end of the service, I may say, we're all going to go and have coffee together. While we're having coffee, it'd be great if you could share what God has been up to during your week this week. Okay. If that's where I stop, okay, you guys, I'm in person speaking to the whole congregation that are over here that you can't see because all you can see is me, but there's hundreds of them, guys, in my garden today. Okay, and if I say that to you, what happens is and then I'm like, right, we're going to go now, and the service finishes. You guys all look about as happy as you are now, okay, and you're like, yeah, what do we do now? Is that the end of it for us? Okay, I then need to say something along the lines of, and those people on Zoom are like, Zoom pastor is going to come and talk you through, okay, you're going to go into breakout rooms and you're going to share what God has been up to in your week over a cup of tea and coffee. Okay, and then someone pops on, he's been on a call the whole time, pastor in your call, and begins to say, right, go and get yourself a cup of tea because it's tea, like we're going to have tea. Okay, and when you come back, we'll go off into breakout rooms, we'll meet some new people, and we'll begin to tell what God has been up to during our week. If you've got to go, because Jen's got to go feed the dog and someone else has got to do this, that's fine. But everyone else who wants to say, this is what we're going to do and it's going to be fine. Okay, and that's how we would do it. Okay, because you then said, what we're going to do offline, we're going to do online. What we're going to do online, we're going to do offline. And I've specifically made you feel really welcome because I've brought someone in who's on an even playing field, and that's hybrid. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, I'm going to pause there for a second because I've just done that thing I do, which I tell everyone you should never do when you're presenting, which is talk straight for 26 minutes very quickly. Okay, you're going to go, I'm going to give you 5 minutes in breakout rooms. If you want to go and get a drink or mute yourself and turn your video off and don't want to go into breakout rooms, that's fine. And maybe you want just 5 minutes to just like take in what I've said, which is fine. Go to breakout rooms. I'm a very simple person, okay? So I don't have loads of questions. I only have 2, and they're the same every time I have to send anyone into breakout rooms. The first question is, what was your light bulb moment? Okay, what was the thing you're like, yes, that makes sense? And the second thing is, I also recognize I don't make sense a lot of the time. And so what didn't make sense? What was the one question you had that you just like maybe me to unpack a little bit more and maybe to challenge me on? Okay, so number 1 was, what was your light bulb moment? Number 2, what was the thing that didn't make sense? Or maybe put politely, what was the one question you had? That makes sense? Okay, so Brian will put us into breakout rooms. You could just do 2 breakout rooms, Brian. We'll bring them back at say 42, give them 5 minutes. And then if you want to go and get a drink, that's fine. We'll be back at 42. If people go off in the breakout rooms, that's fine. Cool. We'll do a bit of feedback because there was some really helpful, certainly in my breakout room, which is obviously the best one, and there was some really helpful conversations. So it'd be good to hear from the other breakout room if what the conversation was like. So what was everyone's light bulb moment? You want us to go first?
Sorry, I was pointing at Belinda.
Yeah, nice. Belinda, go. Belinda, you're muted.
Sorry, I didn't have one.
Cool.
I had another one for the other bit.
Yeah, fine. All right, go for that. What was your question? What didn't make sense?
It was when you said something like everyone has access on their phones. You know, if somebody's got a phone, then yes, they can access it. Sometimes they don't have the knowledge, and we can help them with that. Yes. Sometimes they don't have confidence to use it, and we can probably help with that. But some people just don't want to do it. Yes,
agreed. So I was double talking about 2 things at the same time because I could do that. I was talking about people accessing the services and our experiences, but also having access to the information now that they didn't have before. So we're no longer information keepers rather than enablers, like of information. And so when we, for instance, one of the things, and you'll hear preachers have already started to change this attitude, or worship leaders are saying, we're going to look at, I know we're looking at one passage in Hebrews this week, but feel free to go online and Google it if you want to find out more information about it. and actually start to change the dynamic from being I am the sole keeper of the information rather than the person that unlocks the door for other people. And that is it's a real mind shift. And I'm like on the younger end of the spectrum. That's a real mind shift even for me as a preacher, because that wasn't what I was taught. What I was taught as a worship leader or a preacher was, actually, I'm the one, this is terrible, but I sometimes feel like I'm the one with all the power, and I'm translating. I've downloaded this information from God this week, and I'm telling it to you. Whereas actually, when you're at home or when you're doing hybrid, actually that, for instance, I was watching church last week, and Catherine was preaching, our minister, who's amazing, but she said something that took me on a wild goose chase, right? And so the whole sermon, I was on my phone Googling about this particular thing that she said that I didn't understand. I listened to absolutely nothing else that she said, but this thing struck a chord in my brain that I needed. And whether or not that's positive, that's just what people are doing. And we all do it, right? We're all doing meetings. We all do it. Like, we'll be doing it in this, like, we'll be doing multiple things at the same time. And so we can either choose to inhabit that thing or not. I'm of the opinion that probably easier for us to not tell people it's wrong, but instead tell them what they should be looking at and open a door. So that's the first thing I was talking about. The second thing is, right, I'm going to talk about the issues in a second, and you've just unpacked 4 of them in a second. Confidence is a real issue. Skills are a real issue. And the truth of the matter is, it's people like me's job to offer ourselves up and say, which is what I do, which is why I'm here on a Saturday afternoon, and say, how can we offer ourselves as people, as Brian will, and offer ourselves as people to say, what are the technologies you need? Yes, there's tea coming in Jen's room. God,
where's ours?
Where is ours? Don't stop now. You're in. Cool. Our group. What? Or in that group, is there anything you want to share, Helen, or are you happy?
I didn't share it in the group, but one thing that struck that I sort of thought was a useful tool is actually that reminder shortly before something's happening, and
Great.
And how you get that out. I mean, I'm aware in some places that happens. It doesn't happen where I'm actually a member, but you know, that sort of, because other things crop in, and just getting that, you know, half an hour before, oh, it's going to be whatever in half an hour's time, don't forget, come along, join us. You know, it's just something we can do quite easily.
Go, Jen.
And I should say that, I mean, we know each other pretty well. We're in this room, and we have some particular context. We know each other's context pretty well. My light bulb was the saying, rather than trying to do everything at once, sporadically, do one thing well and faithfully over time. And that strikes me as really important. And I say that in the context of being what is probably the church with the most old-fashioned, if you will, or traditional sacramental worship. Yeah. I want to say we always use the verb curate around worship. And I can think of eight different ways that I hope our worship is on a journey. But also recognizing that we don't have to be all things to all people, because West London Mission is doing something else. Yeah, I love it. And so we can actually, we don't have to compete. Yeah. God forbid, you know. So that really resonated for me. And I see a real danger in that with the plan system, with circuit plans. Yeah. Actually mitigate against that kind of consistency. Yeah. And even stuff like that, you know, we tend to, even for a church meeting, we tend to send out a Zoom link like 3 weeks ago. And then we're like, oh, nobody came to the meeting because I couldn't find the meeting Zoom link. Like that moment, you know, we send out an order of service by WhatsApp in a PDF, just WhatsApp on a broadcast list as the worship is starting, you know, not, you know, what have you, not like eight days ago, sort of. And so those kinds of small pivots, and I think where sin creeps in is idolatrous sort of thinking about, oh well, if I do this, then if we fail, then I have plausible deniability with God.
Yeah.
Look, we did all this, and and that there's no substitution for the back to basics, joy in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And not being afraid to try something and have it go tits up and try something else.
Yeah.
And that actually there's great power in that integrity.
Yeah, and I think that the secret to every digital project is they all start that digital is just that. It's like people tried things and they fail and then try them again until they work. I mean, that's every startup that's now worth billions and billions of pounds has started that journey, as every small website does. It try something that doesn't work and you fix it and then you try it again. And so I think that's really interesting. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I think there's joy in that moment of the sharing and the knowing. I think it's really interesting about the ability to go deeper in worship in a hybrid sense is really interesting. So you can, like in the chat, for instance, you can have the worship song and you can put the lyrics in so people can access them. And do you know what I mean? There's plenty of stuff you could do to create that accessibility for worship that when you're in person is really difficult to achieve. And so there's plenty of things that you can do, and that hybrid teaches us about how to make worship more accessible for people that don't know Jesus. In any form of worship, whether it be an evangelical form of worship or a much more sacramental form of worship that Jen's talks about, there's plenty of things we can all do to learn from each other to do that, which is great.
Can I say one?
You can say as much as you want.
And I confess my prejudice, and I'm working on it, and God is working on me. I have yet to find a way to wash smelly feet digitally.
Yeah, fine. That's not coming anytime soon.
No. And I'm probably pretty glad for that too. But the point is that actually I want to confess a prejudice for face-to-face contact, because Jesus didn't, literally didn't dial it in. And that's not, it's not dismissing the benefits of hybrid but I really prefer the notion of hybrid to online or digital fellowship exclusively, because when we have to come to God's table together, we have to deal with each other in the flesh and deal with those of us who listened to Elaine speak this morning, making each other uneasy by our presence in a way that actually I think is easier to escape if we're digital. And that's assuming, how many thousands of pounds does even just this interaction represent an investment in hardware just for the 8 of us? And that's even assuming the inclusivity of it. So I actually want to declare a prejudice for in-person, face-to-face fellowship supplemented with hybrid stuff, because there are things that I think we can't do. That's not, I don't want to, that's all the communion stuff, that's all a red herring. That's for me. I'm not concerned with that. I'm talking about the most basic awareness of one another and having to be in physical space and not being consumers, but being part of the body of Christ.
Yeah, I'm probably further along the other side of the spectrum. That's why God made us a church, of people of different perspectives. So I think, but it's also really important that we in this conversation experience the issues with digital. It's important that I'm honest about there is so much opportunity, but there are also so many issues with it, and I will never avoid them. One is people can't afford it. Churches can't afford to do it well. People can't afford to access it for a number of reasons, whether it be money affordability or skill affordability. There's loads of issues in and around it. So it's not for everyone. I am by no way suggesting that every church should be doing hybrid. That is absolutely not what I would champion as a person. I think some churches are like, should just be in person, and they should do that really well, and that's what God's called them to. I think the other thing I would say is authenticity is a real issue. So it's really important that we be authentic and find ways to encourage people to be authentic online, full stop. And hybrid sometimes allows people to be, as we've talked about, consumers rather than authentic followers of Jesus. And I find we haven't been to church as a family since the start of the pandemic. My daughter's 3. She has no memory of church. And so seeing her, she honestly can make no difference between watching a video about Jesus and watching Peppa Pig. She has no considerable difference between those two things. Probably would much rather watch Peppa Pig than watch a Jesus video, simply because that's what it's been spent tons of money on thinking about how to do it. And so that is the danger, is we get a generation of people who are comparing church to, I know, the next thing on Netflix, and it's a competition for attention. I think that's what something really be aware of. And also one of the issues I just have, and then we're going to open up a lot of questions around how we measure stuff. So I hear lots of churches I work with saying we've had 1,000 people watch our services on a Sunday, and I kind of want to say, do you know what that means? Because I can dig into those numbers because I know how to do it. So my life doing it. Have you dug into those numbers? How many of them are over 3 seconds? What's the average length of watch time? Because they will give you that's great. You've had 1,000 people. It's great. But if they watch 3 seconds at the beginning, they were all notices. They haven't really engaged in the gospel at all. Or if they've watched 3 seconds where you were singing a song and then they switched off, actually, probably you may have switched them off worship rather than switched them on. And so there's some things around measuring and being honest about measurements. And then the last thing, which Jen has actually unpacked already, is just about competition versus cooperation. And actually, I think there's something beautiful in, and we were one of those 3 churches alongside Jen's church that were recommended in the early days of lockdown as come and watch. And what I loved about that was there were plenty of people who we knew we pointed towards Jen's church who wanted that much more sacramental form of worship than wanted to come and hear a rock band, which is what our church offered to them. And so it's really important that we be honest and authentic about who we are, but also recognise that we encourage people to go to their Zoom gatherings and their small churches rather than just logging on to a big church where they can feel like consumerism. Because actually we all know that hybrid happens best when it's in relationship with other people. And so that, in the same way we know church happens better when it's a relationship with other people, it's no different, is it? So it's important that I just recognise those issues. But I talked for a long time. I'll stop there just because I've run out of time and want to be in show integrity about the timing of the day. But I will stay on with Brian for a few minutes. So for something particularly you want to chat to him about, I'm here. And also, I'll pop the slide up with my email on, because I recognise I haven't gone into a lot of depth about technology and all that kind of thing. So I'll screen share my email. Please feel free to email me if you want a further conversation or a one-to-one, or you want to ask me a question I can answer. I'm on holiday I'm going on holiday. This is the last thing I'm doing because I haven't had a holiday. So I'm going off for August, but when I'm back, I promise you that I will email you back and we can have a conversation. So I'll throw my email up. If you've got to go, great. If you want to stick around for a few minutes and ask me questions, that's fine. Other than that, have a great day. Be blessed, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.